If you were trapped in the world's dumbest police precinct when a toxic storm broke loose, turning everyone it touches into zombies, what would you do? We've covered all sorts of zombies in all sorts of scenarios, from thinking zombies to plague zombies to good old-fashioned just undead zombies. Usually, they're the sole menace in an otherwise normal world. This time, they're summoned back to life by a pervasive acid rain cloud that forces everyone to shelter in place without hope of rescue. If you're Amityville's worst in blue, that means doing a terrible job policing a building that is slowly being invaded inside and out. Let's see if we can survive their incompetence and keep the zombies out. I'm going to break down the mistakes made by our terrible cops, see if we can make better decisions, and ultimately attempt to beat the acid rain zombies in the Amityville Uprising. In Amityville, New York, an off-color radio broadcast is interrupted by a massive chemical explosion at Fort Johnson Military Base, accompanied by a 6.0 earthquake. In the aftermath, soldiers rush to neutralize the situation. International news anchors tell us 27 soldiers have been counted among the dead so far, and 12 are wounded. Inside the facility, the soldiers find more dead in the wreckage. A badly wounded scientist emerges from a doorway and warns them that it was a nitrogen oxide explosion that shot sulfur dioxide into the air. She tells them to clear the area, that the fumes already in the air will kill everything nearby. He asks her how they can contain it, but she tells him it's too late, before she too collapses and dies. Oh boy, where do we start? How about with the incorrect uniforms and zero protective equipment these soldiers are wearing? While it makes sense that the first to arrive at an emergency on a military base would be military personnel, it should and would be more than two random soldiers wearing goggles and a rag over their nose and mouth. These two make the National Guard unit in The Hills Have Eyes 2 look like CAG. Of course, it's possible these two were already on site when the explosion occurred and immediately leapt into action to look for survivors. Even if we give them the benefit of the doubt, they likely have a protocol in place regarding who to call in the event of a chemical disaster. Amityville, New York is located only 41 miles from New York City. An explosion like this would be classified as a CBRNE incident, with the potential to produce a toxic effect on the exposed personnel and civilians. And every government and local agency would be going crazy racing to contain the situation before it spread out of control. The soldiers' first call should be to the EPA's Emergency Operations Center, which would be able to coordinate environmental contamination testing and airborne chemical testing equipment and personnel within the hour. And since they wouldn't know yet whether the explosion was an accident or a terrorist attack, they'd also likely want to call the Department of Defense to set off an investigation and a damage assessment. This phone call would trigger a cascading response by multiple government departments, including the Department of Energy and the Department of Health and Human Resources, among others. And while the Department of Defense runs a federal investigation, New York's governor would be rallying the National Guard and FEMA to be part of the response team, probably coordinating a mass evacuation of the Big Apple, while teams work on the ground in Amityville to save as many as they could. These first response soldiers would also likely have access to CBRNE PPE, which is protective gear rated for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear disaster, or MOP gear level 4, mission-oriented protective posture gear used during chemical and nuclear strikes. They should be wearing this gear to search, considering it would be pointless to find a survivor only to die before you can get them out. Military bases where chemical testing is done also usually have an on-site fire department, which is trained for specific site hazards and knows how to respond with appropriate PPE. The other problem here is that these two soldiers have entered a disaster area to look for survivors while carrying live ammo in their weapons and no first aid kits. When they find a survivor and she collapses, they don't even feel for a pulse or begin compressions. If she wasn't dead before, she is now. Maybe they're there to offer the victims exploratory surgery with lead needles. As for the scientist, she may be too disoriented to remember to use the emergency eye wash and safety shower station, which is required by law to be located near the exit of every laboratory. These showers are designed for this exact scenario, used to flush hazardous chemicals away from the bodies of affected individuals. She also seems to be disoriented to the point where she's feeding these soldiers useless information by talking about nitrogen oxide and sulfur dioxide. Nitrogen oxide describes a family of nitrogen and oxygen molecules ranging from nitric oxide to trinitromide. The most common one is nitrogen dioxide, which is released from burning gas. The fire raging through the building would release NO2 on its own. Sulfur dioxide is another common pollutant expelled by burning coal, oil, or diesel fuel. The chemical explosion she's describing is the equivalent of normal diesel trucks driving. Essentially, for the chemicals released to kill and transform people the way they do later, she would have to be lying or mistaken about the chemical makeup of the explosion. Lying would be a real shitty thing to do when she's already dying herself. It's not like you're keeping the secret now. This is another reason why the soldiers would want to contact the EPA and DoD immediately so they can assess the actual threat looming in the chemical cloud over their heads. In an emergency news update, New York's governor asks citizens to remain inside for 48 hours while they try to contain the disaster. Of course, no one listens. Warnings of acid rain barely faze anyone. Sergeant Dash gabs over coffee that his department is too understaffed to evacuate anyone, even if it comes to that. A crimson cloud travels over the city like it's preparing Amityville for a 7 days to die horde night. At the police department, Stevenson acts like any news about the explosion is coming in via a news anchor and not, say, from any investigation on their part. We learn that their department is being merged with a larger department in the central part of the city, and that, conveniently, their radios are not working. Mrs. Chen arrives to pay a parking ticket. Elsewhere in the building, Officer Rossi practices at the gun range. The sergeant brings in a dinner sandwich to the medical examiner Dr. Ira and his assistant Childs, the resident clowns in this mismanagement circus. A body's arm jump scares Childs and Dr. Ira reassures him that it's rigor mortis. We also learn that they're awaiting the arrival of prisoner Joe Gallo, the Amityville Strangler, their last detainee before their department closes. When news of Joe Gallo's capture reaches news anchor Jerry, she tells her department head she wants to cover the story herself and heads to Amityville. Meanwhile, Sergeant Dash's son Jimmy arrives, dumped on his dad for the weekend by his flaky mother. The department's detective McQueen finally arrives with Gallo. This precinct is now a zombie honeypot full of moronic meatbags. The fact that these officers need a local news station for updates to an explosion that happened in their own town only hours ago tells us this is a squad nobody calls to handle an emergency. Most of these officers aren't even wearing the ranks correctly. Some of the ranks are literally upside down, and they can't even handle a parking ticket payment. Despite wearing the correct rank, Officer Rossi seems to be proudly and blindly firing down this gun range without hitting a target once. And the medical examiner is so filthy and negligent that he's contaminating potential evidence on the bodies of murder victims with ketchup and mustard from his sandwich, endangering the chain of custody. Your best strategy if you find yourself in this particular precinct is to leave immediately and find shelter elsewhere. If it's already raining, find a room with water, food, a radio, and a strong door and barricade yourself inside to wait out the storm and any incoming rounds from a negligent firearm discharge. As acid rain pours down over the city, an idiot steps out of his car and gives the worst melting performance I've ever seen, before suddenly transforming into a zombie. Meanwhile, a quote-unquote fun weatherman makes jokes about the impossible acid hurricane currently squatting over Long Island and melting people alive. Back at the police station, the lieutenant takes a statement from a civilian named Cooper, but they're interrupted by Mrs. Chen. She berates Dash again for not being able to pay her ticket. Cooper excuses himself to the bathroom. After Lieutenant Stevenson flirts his way to pictures with news anchor Jerry, he agrees to give her 20 minutes with the Strangler for an exclusive interview. Mrs. Chen reaches her literal melting point as she stomps out of the precinct and acid rain begins to eat her alive. The officers smother her in plastic tarp and spirit her back inside. I don't like to make blanket statements about people's intelligence, but Baldy here has all the willful ignorance of a Minnesota college kid wearing shorts and flip-flops to class in January. Normal acid rain has the acidic strength of tomato juice, but if the radio is blaring emergency warnings not to go outside, I might find a covered place to get out of my car just in case. Even if you don't want to do that, what's the harm in cracking your window to double check? One burn on your arm later, and you'll know whether to believe big radio or not. Chuckles the weatherman better hope he's not under that acid hurricane if it really is raining hydrochloric acid strong enough to melt people. If it is, then everything metal should be melting, like Baldy's car and parts of the police department building, like any air ducts or air conditioning on the roof, any metal bars on the windows, any doorknobs, hinges, or screws holding windows or other external panels in place. As for Mrs. Chen, I don't know about you, but I have this little evolutionary advantage called instinctive avoidance of painful situations. If you walk out into burning rain, run back inside. Don't spin in circles as your skin melts off your bones. The officers who went to save Mrs. Chen lucked into the right choice with the plastic tarp they used to cover her and bring her inside with. Hydrochloric acid is stored in acid-resistant plastic containers, so the plastic should offer resistance long enough to get her to safety. However, once inside, there is no reason to leave the tarp dripping with dangerous chemicals on her body. The tarp should be left by the exit for potential use later. Mrs. Chen is moved to the morgue, where the lieutenant tells everyone to get comfortable. No one's allowed outside in the deadly rain. Upstairs, the department's rookie opens the front door and encounters the zombie from earlier. She barely gets the door shut and goes running for the lieutenant. I will say, her door closing game is on point. While everyone else is distracted, Gallo reaches through his bars and steals a weapon from a bucket of tools that happen to be within reach. Back in the morgue, Mrs. Chen begs for help. Dr. Ira whips the plastic tarp off her body, accidentally splattering acid rain and scalding Malloy's head and Childs' arm. Once the officers move Mrs. Chen inside, they should know from experience that Dr. Ira's morgue is not the most sanitary place to put her. And as the resident doctor who went to medical school to become a medical examiner, Dr. Ira should know he needs to find something basic like baking soda or milk and pour it over Mrs. Chen's wounds to neutralize the acid. He should also know to remove the chemical-soaked tarp carefully to avoid harming her further or hitting anyone else in the room. Malloy sprints away squirming and no one thinks to chase after him to make sure he's okay. Dr. Ira should be guiding him back to the morgue, which should have an eye wash station Malloy can use. Officer Rossi makes her own inexplicable decisions in the lobby, her morbid curiosity getting the better of her and convincing her to open the front door. Rossi has just witnessed Mrs. Chen burned alive by the rain, so she knows what the weather outside can do. She's only lucky a gust of wind didn't painfully scald her back into reality. Not to mention, Baldy appears at the door looking more like a victim in need of medical care than a monster, and she slams the door in his face. Sure, we know he's a zombie, but the police officer doesn't. It's a huge leap in logic to assume he's dangerous. Even if he is, that's what the Glock on her hip is for. And let's not forget, violent strangler Gallo left unguarded in his cell. In the bathroom, Malloy barrels past Cooper, desperate for water to pour on his face, but the sink is out of order. He screams in pain as he notices his wounds in the mirror. The acid rain has hit one of his eyes and his cheeks. He rips his own cheeks off and slams his head onto the sink, falling to the floor. Cooper tries to check on him when Malloy's zombie rears up and chomps down on his arm. Cooper calls out, but nobody shows up to save him. Scrolled away in his bathroom, Cooper would have no idea what's happening in the rest of the building, but he should be quicker on his feet here, either to offer Malloy CPR or to run for help. Honestly, if I saw a man rip off his own face in front of me, you couldn't pay me enough to stay in that bathroom with him. I'd be sprinting out of the door looking for a doctor or a gun before he even hit the floor with a concussion. A news break warns the local area that they're in full lockdown. Nobody should go outside. Gallo's trying to pick his cell lock with the tool he pulled from the bucket when the lieutenant shows up and delivers Jerry and her camera guy for their interview before leaving again. In the morgue, the lights have gone out. Childs flicks on a lighter only to come face to face with the zombified Mrs. Chen. Dash tries calling out over the radio to Malloy, Childs, and Dr. Ira, but nobody answers. Meanwhile, a zombie Cooper crawls his way out of the bathroom. In a trained police department, Lieutenant Stevenson would know better than to let Jerry and her camera guy anywhere near Gallo. Not only because it might damage their investigation or any upcoming trial, but also because they haven't questioned him yet, or searched his body for weapons or evidence. Gallo is also an alleged killer of women. At the very least, Stevenson would be standing nearby to prevent Jerry from accidentally stepping too close to Gallo's cage, where he could easily reach through the bars and attack her. He would also want to listen to the interview anyways, because if Gallo was read his Miranda rights before being brought to the station, anything he says in the interview could be held against him in a court of law. That's all to say, it's in the lieutenant's best interest to hang around and make sure Gallo doesn't cause any more problems inside the station than they already have. More importantly, once the lights go out in this building, it's time to go to work. A few simple steps here could have ensured the survival of every non-zombie member of this group. First, everyone needs to gather together in one location to assess the situation. If they had gathered, Rossi would have been able to tell everyone about her encounter with Baldy in the lobby, and officers could be dispatched to investigate. They would discover he's a zombie and know what they're dealing with in a more concrete way. Second, the group needs to address 4 facets of this situation. 1. Defense. 2. Power. 3. Supplies. And 4. Communication. The first is obvious. 3 officers need to gear up with guns, ammo, and protective protective gear and move through the building, barricading ground floor doors and windows. The rest of the group should move to an interior room away from windows and low enough in the building that the hazardous rain will have to eat through several layers of the building to reach them. No one should be wandering off in the dark alone. Once the ground floor has been barricaded, 2 armed officers and the resident fix-it guy, Dr. Ira, should be dispatched to reach the generators and circuit breakers to restore power. While it might draw attention from zombies outside, restoring power in the short term will allow the other officers to move methodically and quickly from floor to floor, checking rooms and clearing zombies. Once the building is clear of threats, additional barricades could be allocated to the main floor while civilians gather food and water and store it in an open jail cell, a final fallback position where survivors can hide safely if the building becomes overrun. The two-way walkie-talkies should be handed out to each party member and set to the same channel so they can communicate throughout the building. There doesn't seem to be much reason why their comms aren't working, so if need be, someone needs to work on that as well. Meanwhile, the most tech-savvy of the group should be trying to restore their outside communication, or use flashlights to try signaling to nearby buildings. Instead, these buffoons wander off by themselves, investigate strange struggle noises, get cornered in rooms, and miss zombies crawling on the floors beneath their feet. Back in the main office, Stevenson rushes in searing pain. He says he only peeked outside, but got hit with acid rain across his arm. Stevenson tells Rossi to go collect the reporter and camera guy. The interview is dead on arrival when the camera guy hears a noise from a nearby bathroom. Jerry follows him in, but neither sees Gallo open the cell door behind them. Rossi makes her way through the building with a lighter. She finds Gallo's cell door open. She draws her gun and tries to call out for reinforcements, but again, the radio isn't working. She hears noises from the bathroom and opens the door to find Jerry stabbing her camera guy to death with a screwdriver. Rossi tells her to drop the screwdriver, but Jerry refuses and swipes with the screwdriver, slicing Rossi's cheek. Suddenly, Jerry's camera guy springs up again and bites into her neck. She stabs him again and rushes into the hall, coming face to face with Meaty Malloy. Terrified, she watches Gallo creep up behind the zombie Malloy and club him over the head with a sledgehammer. Back in the bathroom, zombie Cooper finds Rossi disoriented and bites down on her cheek. This is why we can't have nice things. Everyone in this building seems to have forgotten their training the second they walked in this morning. Stevenson saw what the rain did to Mrs. Chen's body. There's no need to peek outside. He should also know to send pairs of officers to investigate the whereabouts of civilians. We don't see what happened in the bathroom after Jerry follows her camera guy in, but Rossi enters the room knowing that Jerry has just brutally attacked a man. She should back into the hallway and demand Jerry drop the screwdriver, so she's out of range of Jerry's weapon. If Jerry refuses to drop it, Rossi should use her taser to subdue her. Jerry's behavior is simply unpredictable, making her a danger to herself and others. With Jerry subdued, Rossi would also have been in a better position to react when the camera guy springs back to life and begins attacking. As for Jerry, her blind panic ultimately gets her killed. If you're going to slash a cop in the face, leave immediately afterwards. It's unclear whether she had time to make the connection to her camera guy's transformation in zombies, but she knows he tried to attack her before, and she should be physically far away from his body once Rossi is incapacitated. In the hallway, we're left with incomplete information regarding Jerry and Gallo's encounter, but she seems to have transformed pretty quickly after. Upstairs, Dr. Ira comes to check on Jimmy organizing the morgue supply closet. Ira says the power should be on any second, then closes Jimmy in again. Lieutenant Stevenson sees something crawl past the main office door. Zombie Cooper appears at the lobby window, but disappears suddenly. Stevenson, Dash, and McQueen automatically assume it's a zombie and argue about what to do. McQueen mentions his truck is in the alley, but Dash wants to clear the building and get his son. Stevenson warns he doesn't even know where his son is, or if he's still alive. Dash says he was such a terrible father, he can't abandon his son now, and they agree to go save Jimmy together. The trio grabs shotguns and moves into the hall, where they encounter Cooper and blow him away. Like I mentioned earlier, these cops are so bad at their jobs, they simply can't be trusted with our survival. They're more likely to get us killed than save us from anything, as we see here when they shoot Cooper in the face before ever actually confirming he's a zombie. Again, we know he's a zombie. They do not. Their only smart decision here is to stay in the building instead of leaving. But again, they need to fortify this building and begin methodically clearing it of enemies while gathering survivors. Unfortunately, they seem to be the shoot first, ask questions later flavor of cops. So again, it's probably in our best interest to find a room with supplies we can barricade and wait until they've all gotten each other killed. Down in the morgue, Dr. Ira looks for Childs. Zombie Mrs. Chen reaches for him. Ira whips out a scalpel and gets her on the ground before curb stomping her to death. He turns to the doorway and sees zombie Childs standing there. Scalpel in hand, he finishes Childs off too. But his work isn't done, as the morgue drawers suddenly begin opening and zombies crawl out. out. Dash radios Jimmy in the supply closet, but the radio only works one way. Jimmy tells his dad he thinks he hears Dr. Ira outside, and then he grabs a bat. Dash, McQueen, and Stevenson descend towards the morgue. They find Rossi's bloody keys and a gun on the floor when the zombie camera guy suddenly appears. Stevenson double taps him. Dr. Ira seems to be the only party member who actually waits for people to attack before killing them, so at least he's got that going for him. Jimmy's been in the closet practically this whole movie. He has no reason to suspect anything dangerous is outside, but he still grabs a bat for protection. I can respect that. As for our idiots in blue, let's hope survivors in this building have the forethought to speak before revealing themselves to these officers, because they kill this person walking towards them in the dark without ever actually confirming he's a zombie. For all they know, he's just an innocent, blood-covered survivor looking for help. Instead, he gets 2 shotgun blasts to the face. Dr. Ira continues to the medical examination room and finds a zombie cheerleader crab walking towards him in the dark. She tears into his chest. At an intersection, the trio pauses. Stevenson hears a sound. Suddenly, zombie Rossi tears into his neck from behind. McQueen leans down to check on him. Stevenson is dead. Rossi leaps out again and bites down on McQueen's forearm. McQueen puts the shotgun to her chin and blows half of her head off. He wraps his arm wound and they continue onward. Malloy springs out and Dash blows him away. Let's have a moment to collectively sigh at the incompetence here. Of anyone, Dr. Ira is the only person who knows these blood-covered people are dangerous. There's no way zombie Barbie should even be able to get close to him, let alone tear into his chest without taking a scalpel to the head. Also, why did Dr. Ira stick around down here after killing Mrs. Chen and Childs? I would be sprinting out of this dark basement looking for reinforcements. We're in a police department, for God's sake. And how did 3 trained officers in a narrow hallway let a single zombie sneak up on them twice? It's a 3-way intersection. They should have their backs pressed to each other with their mag lights illuminating each hallway and their guns raised, prepared to fire if somebody attacks. McQueen and Dash find Gallo walking out of the morgue. They aim their guns at him, but he's suddenly swarmed by one of his former victims and zombie Jerry, who feasts on him as McQueen and Dash simply walk away. Finally, they arrive to the morgue supply closet where they find Dr. Ira chowing down on Jimmy's body. Dash is overcome with grief and succumbs as a horde of zombies floods the hall from either direction. McQueen's fate is left ambiguous as he stumbles off screen and the credits begin to roll. This horde of zombies seems to be arriving from nowhere and everywhere, so maybe this really is a 7 Days to Die horde night. In the end, McQueen and Dash could have taken shelter in the supply closet and killed Dr. Ira and Jimmy, but given this horde's ability to find them anywhere in the building, it's likely they would have gotten in eventually. And ultimately, with the general idiocy of this cast, I'm almost relieved that they've all been removed from the gene pool. This entire fiasco of a situation simply boils down to level-headed thinking and coordinating a group response rather than acting alone. Once Mrs. Chen melted in their driveway, this cop squad should have gathered remaining survivors together, barricaded the building, killed the zombies already inside, and worked to re-establish communication with the outside while they waited for the storm to break. Mrs. Chen, Baldy, and the bodies in the morgue who all turned into zombies for unknown reasons were unpreventable. The rest of these deaths were not. Officer Malloy's zombification was purely accidental, the result of a spritz of acid rain. He receives a survivor score of 1 out of 5, simply because we never actually got to see him taking these zombies on. As a zombie, he actually seems to be doing okay. Cooper was just in the wrong place in the wrong time. He didn't want to live anyways, so we'll give him a survivor score of 1 out of 5. Jimmy and Childs had no idea what was going on until it was too late, so they also get a survivor score of 1 out of 5. Officer Rossi, Jerry, and her camera guy were all the sort of terrible horror movie characters who wander into darkened rooms with growling creatures. I award them a survivor score of 0 out of 5, even if Jerry did half-stab her camera guy to death. Prisoner Gallo actually had a decent chance of surviving if he had decided to return to his cell or seek higher ground after encountering Malloy and Jerry in the hallway. He receives a survivor score of 2 out of 5. Dr. Ira, with his gross ketchup and mustard hands, actually seemed like he could handle himself until zombie Barbie overloaded his brain and he forgot about the scalpel in his hand. I'll give him a survivor score of 2 out of 5. As for Lieutenant Stevenson, Sergeant Dash, and Detective McQueen, what can I really say? If they had any logical problem-solving skills at all, they might have been able to save most, if not all of the people under their protection, and I would be giving them a much higher score. As it is, I'll give them each a survivor score of 1 out of 5, generously. Like I said, the only reason most of these people are dead is sheer stupidity and lack of leadership, so I think the acid rain zombies in the Amityville Uprising were beaten. How would you have beaten the Amityville Uprising? Let me know in the comments. Hit the like button to save a stranger's life. Hit the subscribe button to save your own. Thanks for watching, and remember, nobody is coming to save you.